All right, people. So I've just found myself watching a film that you know, what I mean? Normally, yeah, it wouldn't have drawn me to go see it at the cinema. But, right, here's the thing. Whenever Lionsgate hit me, I'm always gonna take a look because they've just been mad helpful and people are so nice there, right? But sometimes you think, I don't know, am I gonna like this? But I recognize a few of the people mentioned, and I was like, I know this stuff, right? Yeah. And I was just curious. So I am talking about the Jesus music, right? Which yeah, it's an interesting documentary. It really is, right? It's 108 minutes. You know what I mean? So an hour and 48 minutes, but it is compelling. I'm not gonna lie, right? So it is directed by Andrew and Jon Erwin. They're brothers. You know, John, he wrote the screenplay. It's produced by Brandon Gregory and Josh Walsh. Christopher Kremlin handled the cinematography. Parker Adams and John Puckett edited the piece. And yeah, the, the 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 gist. Well, I mean, firstly, let's because it features people such as um Amy Grant, right? Amy Grant is there. We've got Toby Mac. I was gonna say a lot of these people I did not know, right? I had no clue who some of these were, but I knew who Amy Grant was. I've enjoyed Amy Grant's stuff. So yeah, um, Michael W. Smith, Laura um, Daigle, Kirk Franklin, um, yeah, Michael Taff, right? Larange, Larac, sorry, Larac, CC Winan. So yeah, it's featuring all of these artists, and yeah, the gist of the piece is this, right? The film documents the history of contemporary Christian music from its roots in the Jesus music of the 1970s through the Christian rock and Christian metal eras of the 80s and 90s into the rise of praise and worship music in the early 21st century. Um, and yeah, so also, there was Stephen Curtis Chapman, Toby McKinnon, um, Russ Taff. Yeah, they're all featured in this piece. And what was interesting was, right, so they were talking about, it started off with a few people saying, where they first kind of discovered the music. Amy Grant said in a coffee shop. Someone else said, I think it was Taff said in, he was looking in a record shop and he found a record. Right. So yeah, it's just talking about that. And then we got into the kind of beginning of it all. And so a few people were just talking and they were saying that, so the hippie movement started. And it was people rebelling against the American dream because they perceived it not really being a dream, right? It was something they didn't want, and that was Vietnam, right? So there was all of this stuff, but people didn't like hippies. You know what I mean? Um, and the church didn't want hippies, but there was then one place, Calvary, right, in Costa Mesa. the Calvary Chapel, and they were just like, yeah, well, anyone can come, man, whatever. There was a hippie who had started to preach there. He'd found God. One of the other preachers there, a bald dude, he was giving out messages, and people just kind of resonated with it, flooded there. And there's a lot of musicians, so the music started. And what was interesting was it was just like it was a tribe, right? So the hippie movement, that's a tribe, right? The church became a tribe. It was these people looking for something, looking for the answers because they didn't want to go to war. They were just like, what's going on? Everything is kind of crazy. And, they were like, oh, we tried to escape in drugs. We were looking for these answers in drugs. But there was a Rolling Stones concert, which was a little bit of a crazy situation. I think 8 people died, right? And then people were like, maybe this isn't the way. So yeah, that's when they started going to this church. And as I said, look, it's a tribe. Because everyone's looking for identity, and they couldn't find it in one place, and they're like, oh, maybe here, right? Maybe this will work. And so you saw people then just gravitating to this church, looking for answers and everything like that. But no one wants to. No one like talked about it like that. It was just like, yeah, we were looking for answers, and then we found them, and it was here. We felt like we were saved, and which, hey, if that works for you, all power to you, man. That's golden. You know what I mean? Because essentially, people just want to belong, right? People want to belong. People want to feel accepted. And if that worked for these people, it's great. What was interesting was, they were talking and saying that, there was a band and they wanted to play music, right? But at first, the pastor was just like, we kind of rock music in here, which is kind of crazy, just in that sense, to say no, right? But he was like, oh, let me just hear some songs anyway. And he loved the song, so he's just like, all right, you can play. And it then kind of spawned from there. And I say it's kind of crazy because of this, right? Because the church always talks about acceptance, but no rock, right? And that's the crazy thing, because a lot of the stuff talked about in here, it was about not being accepted, judgment. And you're like, isn't that the opposite of what this should be? That was the really weird thing about all of this. There was this talk about, oh yeah, this wasn't accepted, and they turned on this artist because they were doing this, and you're like, wait, what? No, that's weird. You know what I mean? That's so weird, right? It makes no sense. There was a band called Strike, Strife, Strife or Strike, right? They wore these yellow, yeah, yellow and black striped leather. Like one person was like, it was kind of dangerous, and I'm like, no, you look like bumblebees. That's not dangerous. Oh my gosh! But hey, you know what I mean? Whatever works, right? It is golden. But yeah. So they were talking and all of this, and you're like, all right. But it was a couple of brothers that started this band. One of them was saying, it's like, yeah. So we were sitting in front of the TV, and we heard this guy talking, Jimmy Swagger, a preacher. And they're like, oh man, and the whole family kind of bowed their heads and prayed with him, and we all found God and blah blah blah. And then as they got older, they're like, oh, we love music, and we started a band, and then we were talking about God and blah 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 in our lyrics, and everyone loved it. He was saying that MTV didn't want to play them, but because you could ring up and request music, so many people requested the music, they were at number one all the time on their play charts and all of this. And they were like headlining, stadiums, and just, it was crazy. They were blowing up. But one day they were watching Swagger, because they loved Swagger, and he started to denounce them. Hold up their records and be like, this is the devil's music. And it's just like the hypocrisy of it all. That was the crazy thing. It was like they're talking about this, and no one's just saying the hypocrisy, right? The craziness of these statements saying it's devil's music and you shouldn't listen and all of that. But that caused the band to spiral, right? They were like, oh, we went to drink and we were getting crazy. It's just like, wait, what are you doing? Like, huh? And like, is it that fragile? Your supposed faith, right? It just seemed odd. It seemed odd, but the questions weren't getting asked, which I thought was interesting. I was like, how come no one's asking these people about these things? Being like, well, if you believed so much, how could your faith be rocked just because one person was saying they didn't like you? You know what I mean? I find that interesting, right? And it's not a knock on the music or anything like that. It's just the perception of it all, of why it's being created, what the aim is you think it's like, I don't care. This is what we're doing. We believe we are, putting this thing out, right? So there's that side of it, which was interesting, right? Then they were talking about Amy Grant, and man, as we're like, baby, baby, I'm heading for that notion. A love like this is given my devotion. How great is that song, man? I loved that song as a kid. You know what I mean? And because at first they're talking about Amy Grant, and it was funny. One of the guys was like, yeah, when she first started, like, she had these songs. She couldn't really sing that well. And it's just like, yo, what? And it's that funny notion, because people believe that you need to sing in a certain way for you to sing well. And I always say, right, you look at people like Karen O, Jack White, you know what I mean? Josh Hon. They don't have the perceived great voice, but their voices are so distinct. They're great, right? You know who they are as soon as you hear a note from them. Like these people who are like supposedly trained, you hear them on these silly singing shows. Couldn't pick them out of a lineup. But this unique voices, that's great. But yeah, they're talking about Amy Grant. And I'm just like, for a minute, I'm like, huh, I'm not sure if this is the person I'm thinking. I was like, was I thinking of Amy Millian? The lead singer of Stars, right? Huh, was I thinking of her? Was it Nico Case, right? The new pornographers. And then they played Baby, and I was like, oh, yes, this, I knew. I'm doubting myself, man. I've been crazy. But yeah, so that was interesting. But then they started to turn on Amy. And you're like, what? Because she got divorced. And you're like, this is nuts. This is nuts. Because she got divorced. The guy she ended up with got divorced. They weren't having an affair or anything, but these two artists, they were in marriages that weren't working. They got divorced and they eventually married each other and they're still together. But it's like they were meant to stay in these unhappy situations. You're like, wait, huh? Isn't your thing meant to be about, love and acceptance and being happy? And like, why would you want someone to stay in bad situations? Why would you turn on someone who you supposedly loved? Right? There's all of this stuff that made no sense. They're talking about DC Talk, who I've never heard of, but were like this huge group for a few years. And that was interesting because they're like, oh, we were arguing all the time. It's like, wait, but if you were all down with this bit, why are you arguing? Like, why is that getting in the way when but no one's asking people these messages. And I kind of feel there's some people that were little prima donnas, right? Seemed like prima donnas because as it started, we had people sitting down. There was these outtakes of people sitting down and be like, "Wait, hold on, no, I'm not sitting. I can't sit like that," or blah blah blah. And you're like, okay, and it's just super interesting, right? Now, also the other person who I knew of, Kirk Franklin, Stomp and just all of that, and just I think one of the big things is that Franklin was the one who always seemed to be there talking about acceptance and coming together and all of this. And it's just like, that's the thing, right? Because you're singing about your love of God, about, all of this. But what else, right? And Franklin was the one that seemed to epitomize the notion of Christianity the most. It's just like there were some songs by Franklin that I really like. I don't like all of it, but that's cool. That's fine. You don't have to like everything someone does, but you look at what they do and you be like, yeah, you're about it. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people that pretend to be a thing, but they're not a thing. It's like as a kid, I remember going to Sunday school because, those were the days when Sundays were dark. I mean, nothing was open. Nothing was like you'd have corner shops allowed to be open in the morning, I think until like 11 o'clock or something like that, right? Nothing else. Nothing else was allowed open. And yeah, it was only until like 11. Then it's locked off. So Sunday school was the only thing, right? You went, you hung out with your friends, and you had to sit through a friggin' sermon, which was just like, but and kids, they let the kids out early, right? You didn't have to sit through the whole thing, which was like, woo-hoo. But the thing I always noticed, and which was just like, hey, I can't do this shit, man. It was the hypocrisy of it all. Because there was the people that would go, they're shitty for the rest of the week. You hear some of the racist bullshit some of these people would say, and then they go to church on a Sunday and they act like, hey, I'm better than you, which is just insane. So it's always refreshing to see someone like Franklin. And the big thing as well was there was all these artists who would be like, yo, I always wanted a mentor, a role model, someone to kind of show me what to do, how to navigate all of this. And I reached out to people and no one would help. But then Kirk reached out. Kirk supported me. Kirk helped me. Kirk opened these doors. He gave me the roadmap. And you're like, yo, that's a stand up motherfucker right there. You know what I mean? And there's other people that you're just like, are you really about it? I don't even know. Right? But yeah, it's just compelling seeing all of this stuff, seeing the people, the journeys these people had gone through, the journeys these people had gone on. There you go. Now, Michael C. Smith, is it Smith or Swift? Ugh. Um, Michael W. Smith. I don't know where I got the C from, people, but he was talking about because they were saying a lot of them, they were doing this Christian music, talking about God, and then they went a little poppy, right? Which some people hated. But then he was like, oh, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this inspiration for this thing, and God was telling me to create this worship album. And it was just a bit like, so you got an idea. Because that's the thing, right? Sometimes I've woken up with, parts of a script or a joke or, just something like that. When I was at uni, my dissertation, you'd be like, that's how I'm going to start it. Oh, that's the middle part. And it's just like, no, it's not God telling me. It's my mind working and working this shit out and be like, that's what you need to do. Like he's like, but it's fine. But I kind of feel you're doing a discredit to your creativity. But still though, it was just like he wanted to create this thing and he got everyone together and they did this thing. And you're like, that's great though, right? That's big. You did you nice. But we got to see these stories. We got to see all of this and just the lifespans of some people and what they were able to achieve and do. So, yeah, it is something I normally wouldn't have watched. But I ain't mad I did. You know what I mean? It was interesting. It's interesting to see um, all of these different people and how there was one guy at the beginning, right? I think his name was Larry something. And they're like, oh yeah, and he was just he would be super aggressive if you crossed him, or if you didn't like something, he told you he didn't like it, and you're like, that doesn't sound very Christian. But no one would call anyone out on their actions and be like, yeah, they were an asshole. They made good music, but they were an asshole, which that is a thing. That's allowed. And I think one thing was, and I said, look, it's this whole thing about people turning on these artists for all these weird reasons, and it's just like you don't have to keep on mentioning God in your thing, right? It could still be this thing without the if you love Jesus, you'll love this song. Do do dee dum 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 dum. No, it's just like it's your actions, right? It's what you do. So you could be singing about a film you saw or a book you like, just whatever, falling in love. But it's the sentiment of it all. That's the thing. So it just seemed weird how, people would turn on people and all of this because it's just like, doesn't seem to be the supposed Christian way. But yeah, no, it's crazy. You see these concerts and everyone, gravitating and singing, but it's a bit like, yeah, that's great. Because how great is it when you go to a gig and everyone is singing and chanting? Like the amount of times I've been to these things. I remember seeing Kasabian or Kaiser Chiefs and going, like leaving the spot, right? I went to Comic Con, New York Comic Con, right? Froze my ass off because I didn't realize it was going to be cold in New York in February. I went with t-shirts. I had no warm jackets or anything, man. But I touched back down in the UK and went to see Kaiser Chiefs. And yeah, everyone is just singing. And at the station, everyone's just like back, like from the different platforms, people are like singing different lines of the songs, and it's incredible, right? And so, yeah, like seeing these big gigs, you're like, yeah, that's what a great concert is, man. But you get this insight, you get this look. So even if Christian music isn't for you, like I think this is just an interesting music documentary just by itself. You know what I mean? So yeah, like if you are Christian, if you do love Christian music, whether it be rock, folk, metal, whatever, the weird Christian rap, then I think you're gonna love the Jesus music. You know, it does play it safe. As I said, look, they don't push people on things, but it's still interesting, man. So yeah, you might want to give it a check.